Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome here if you're new. So today I've decided to kind of do a little reflection video about Ramadan. And at this time of year, as an ex-Muslim convert to Islam, I always take this time to reflect on my own experience and the experiences I went through. And I was reflecting and I was like, I kind of want to share why I used to find Ramadan problematic even when I was a Muslim. And I guess how the fast that would come around every year eventually also helped me to start questioning Islam as a theology as well, which I will get into at the end of the video. So, yeah, I'm going to share my experience and my reflection on Ramadan. And please do bear in mind that I am an ex-Muslim to Islam. So, like, this is from that perspective. So, if you're a Muslim watching this or someone who's thinking about becoming Muslim, please don't take this as me trying to be insulting. I'm reflecting on my own story, something I went through, and I'm just sharing my thoughts. So, yeah, please don't take this as me trying to be rude to anyone. This is just my story. Yeah, so when thinking about Ramadan, the first thing that always comes to my mind and used to come to my mind back then is the dread. The dread I would feel every time fasting would come around. I obviously, being an ex-Muslim convert, my first experience of Ramadan was seeing my classmates talk about their fasting experience. And then when I was working, some of the people I'd work with were fasting as well. So I was very intrigued as to this fast because the first thing I noticed, even before I knew they were fasting, was this drop in energy, like, or this irritation go up. I could just tell from afar, like before I was even Muslim, that whatever they were doing was difficult. And it wasn't really until I lived as a Muslim that I understood just how hard it was to fast, to do an Islamic fast. And that's why I say every year when it came around, I absolutely dreaded the atmosphere because I knew people would start being in a terrible mood. Everybody would feel irritated. I always just felt like those first couple of fasts, I was on edge. And I think here in the UK, what made everything probably a bit worse was the fact that our fast in those summers, particularly those summers, were like 19 hours long. They were long. Oh my goodness. Like doing the suhoor at like 3 a.m. in the morning or 2 a.m. all the way around to 9, nearly half 9 p.m. in the evening. And on top of that, it's summer, so it's the hotter time of year in the UK. It was just a really tough combination. And yeah, it was I would dread it every year because I just knew that that adjustment period was going to be tough. And then even when people adjust, the second part that I used to find really problematic was the inconsiderate behavior from certain people. Let's just say, I remember during one of my fast or one Ramadan, I was actually living in a kind of shared accommodation. So I was renting a room in a house. And obviously, that means that the kitchen was shared. Now, and actually, this was probably my first Ramadan as a Muslim, as a fully practicing Muslim. I was living in London, but my university was somewhere else. So I was having to get up early in the morning to go back to my university. It was like my final year. And obviously, I would have to get up pretty early because it was quite far away from London. I had to take a train, all that lovely stuff. Now, the people in this house who I was living with, they were fasting also, and they would understandably have to get up at like 2 p.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. They'd start to get up and cook their breakfast. Now, not only was they cooking their breakfast, they were clashing and clanking pots and pans, laughing and joking. It was like kind of a social thing. And that was all well and good, but I was trying to sleep. I had somewhere to go. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say in a kind of shared house that cooking or having what sounds almost like a get together at 2 a.m. in the morning is a bit unreasonable. But I felt like I could not, I mean, I would not dream of going up to those people and saying, "Excuse me, could you quiet it down?" They felt like they had the right to do whatever they wanted, no matter how inconsiderate to others it might be or how rude, because they were fasting and they felt like it was their religious right. And I also felt the secondhand shame of, I'm not up at that time in the morning. I'm not eating the breakfast. So they're probably in their head already judging me, probably thinking like you're not even joining in with us. I just knew if I went and confronted them, even in a very polite way, I still would look like the bad one because, they're the ones fasting after all. And that's the religious thing to do. That's the correct thing to do. So, yeah, so I just had to start putting up with this extremely inconsiderate behavior. And it wasn't just that, even when I worked before I was Muslim, yeah, at the same place I was talking about earlier, um, even before I became Muslim, when I was working somewhere else, um, there would be people who were fasting who would tell non-Muslims to please put that drink away in front of me because I'm fasting. And I remember being like, um, excuse me, like, and they would say, yeah, I'm fasting. Like, it's rude of you to drink in front of me, like, especially on this hot day. Looking back now, and even when I was a Muslim, I was like, they are not obliged to fast. This is something that Muslims are instructed to do, and we're in a non-Muslim country. So how can you be there being rude and bolshy and inconsiderate to other people? I'm not saying this is actually what the religion tells you to do. I'm just talking about the behavior I notice from people. I guess because like I said, being in a non-Muslim country, I guess there's more temptation than say if you were somewhere like Saudi Arabia or maybe like in North Africa. But I still think that it was just shockingly rude, some of the things I would see and some of the kind of just the entitlement from some people that they felt they had the right to be rude. And I hated that. And that to me, that just added to the dread of that time of year because things just became awkward. Things just became unnecessarily difficult. And as I said, I know that's actually not a teaching of Islam, but that behavior was kind of common. I'd always expected there was going to be someone who did that. And there wasn't much pushback because I guess people are scared because they want to seem like they are following a religion. And if you try and push back against someone like that, you don't want to be seen as if you're encouraging people not to fast. I guess it's that whole kind of nasiha thing. But that nasiha can just very quickly, and by nasiha, I mean advising someone like Islamically, like you are allowed to remind someone of their religious duty. If you're a Muslim and you see another Muslim not practicing properly or correctly, you do have the right to advise them. But I always thought it was meant to be quite polite, but it always ended up being in a really shameful way. And that just added to the dread of this time of year. I still remember it now. It's something that's really stuck with me. And I guess that kind of leads to my second point, which some people might find relatable, which was this terrible pressure I would see on people who are not even supposed to be fasting for medical reasons or personal reasons, but people would pressure them or they would feel pressured themselves to fast. So let's just say, for example, pregnant women or breastfeeding women, I would see a lot of them being told by other people, like, yeah, you don't technically have to fast, but, if you don't do it now, you're going to have to make it up some other time. So why don't you just do it now while the whole family are fasting? And also, you're going to be rewarded by Allah for the extra effort and whatnot. And I was just like, no, no, no. Like, and even back then, I remember being quite outspoken about this because it really used to be something I didn't like. And I would be like, no, pregnant women are not supposed to, like, they don't have to fast. Breastfeeding women don't have to fast. And when you're pregnant and it's 30 degrees and there's sunlight for 19 hours and you're going without water for 19 hours, I don't think anyone should be encouraging you to fast in that situation. It's already hard enough to be pregnant on its own. And then you have these people peer pressuring you, and you have that kind of internal guilt yourself and that shame because you're like, I just might as well do it because it's for God at the end of the day. And the same went for breastfeeding women. I was like, you need your water supply, man. Like, you need water to produce milk. This doesn't seem right. But as I said, I guess there was so much pressure, uh, and the most kind of disturbing version of that I would see as children being encouraged to fast. And I just knew that that wasn't right because, number one, kids are so much smaller than adults. They need the nutrition, they're growing, and also they're too young to understand what the fast is about. They're just too young. Kids as young as 8 or 9, I really don't think they should be fasting because, number one, they're at school as well. Like, they're at school and it's hot and they can't drink water. And as I said, they're just so young. I remember feeling so bad thinking of these little kids going up without food the whole day. And I've even heard, of primary school teachers seeing students in their class, as young as I said, 8 or 9, falling asleep because they're like, they're fasting and they're exhausted. I just feel like they should start fasting when they understand spirituality a lot better. They should, okay, maybe they can take part in the iftar, or maybe they can give up something that they like, like how kids kind of do for Lent here, maybe give up chocolate for the month and use that as a fast. But the whole thing, I was just horrified to see little kids doing that. I just thought that was so wrong. And that's another part of the reason why I dreaded fasting, was because I didn't like to see people who shouldn't be being pressured, who shouldn't be being talked into doing this and being made to feel proud of themselves for almost harming their health in a way, for depriving themselves at times when they shouldn't be depriving themselves. And that always used to make me, yeah, just really uncomfortable, and didn't used to make me feel good. I used to feel that secondhand suffering of those people. All in all, I know some people really enjoy the time of year of fasting. They love the iftars, and obviously Eid at the end is something to look forward to. But I started to really feel like this whole situation is stressing me out. And I always thought that Ramadan or fasting was supposed to be a time of spiritual growth. And many people do use it as a time for spiritual growth. But what I found as the years went on, I was questioning it more and more every time it would come around. Every time of year I knew it was fasting, the doubts were increasing because I was like, this shouldn't be a time of dread. This shouldn't be a time of stress. I always felt that God or religion should be something that encourages you to grow and reflect on yourself and do well for others. So, with all that I was seeing, I guess it did question me. It did cause me to question the theology behind Ramadan and the theology behind Islamic fasting. Now, many people would say to me, oh, fasting has its benefits, it's good for you. Well, yes, intermittent fasting is good for you. It can be good for you. But this was not intermittent fasting. This was like abstaining from all forms of nutrition, including water, and almost depriving yourself of sleep as well, because you've only got that short window of time when the sun goes down to eat, and then you have to do the Tarawih prayer, which it's long, and you kind of lose sleep because you've got to get up again to have your suhoor. And overall, I just felt like this looks like it's this is really physically demanding for anyone. And it really did make me question, like, why would God make it so tough on people? And what are we proving to him? Like, are we just proving that we can deprive ourselves of? It made me question the nature of the Islamic God, because I was like, if this is what he wants from me, then what does that say about him? And to kind of add to that, I have seen other practices which are not even religious, which are, you could call them secular. Let's just say meditation. That does require some discipline. Actually, it can require a lot of discipline depending on the type of meditation you're doing. And I have actually seen the real life benefits of meditation, and it didn't require me to really push myself to these uncomfortable limits. I always say, if eh, to see how true something is or how reliable it is, just look, you've got to look at the evidence, you've got to look at the results. And what was the results for me of fasting Ramadan was not very good. It was sort of dread, it was exhaustion, and I didn't gain anything from it spiritually. I didn't feel closer to a higher power, or in those days, the God of Islam. But then when I tried other things like meditation and mindfulness, mindful practices, I actually saw the real life benefits of those. I felt not just my anxiety and depression decrease and my emotions, and learning how to start regulating my emotions better. I actually did start to feel more connected to like kind of nature around me and life. And I felt that kind of presentness, that kind of just being in the moment, which is such a wonderful feeling to experience. So yeah, it did force me to reflect and say, okay, one of these feels much more, one of these practices feels much more beneficial and feels actually like I am connecting to a higher source of intelligence or a higher source of knowledge. But as I said, I never got that from Ramadan. I know people do. I know there are Muslims who do love this time of year. They do find that depriving themselves of food and water is a holy thing for them. But on average, I didn't feel it. I just saw so much stress around me and aggravation, and I just felt it wasn't necessary. It wasn't a necessary practice to get closer to God, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's many people who can relate to this out there, who do dread that this time of year, who don't enjoy this time of year. As awful as it might be for some people, as tough as it might be, it's only 4 weeks. So once it's done, and then you can go back to how you were before, if it is a bad time of year for you. And as I said, I acknowledge some people do like this time of year, but I wasn't. I was never one of those people. I always found it to be very stressful. And every time it's Ramadan now, as an ex-Muslim convert, I'm very grateful that I am no longer having to do that. I'm no longer in that environment where I'm pressured to fast when I don't want to. That was just my 2 cents. It's just a reflection, really, and me sharing my experience and kind of putting it out there how some people see fasting even while they're fasting. Not everyone is enjoying doing it. And as always, it's so important to have ex-Muslim voices heard, because we have so many people who want to shut down, especially in the UK. It's almost like we can't talk about our experiences anymore, because we are not in the majority, but our voices, but our stories are still valid. So I think sharing stories like these help to counteract and to push back against those that are trying to silence not just ex-Muslims or ex-Muslim converts, but anyone who doesn't believe in Islam or doesn't agree with its theology or principles. So that's also part of the reason why I've come on here and just put a little bit of my experience out there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do subscribe, like my video if you enjoy watching them also. And yeah, thank you so much for watching to those who did. And I will be making another video soon, hopefully. And yeah, I wish everyone the best. Thank you for watching.